This is Colin O'Keefe for LXBN TV. Your company getting hit with a search warrant can be a trying and serious situation, but it is one you can prepare for and act on deliberately. Joining me now to explain what you should do if your company is hit with a federal search warrant is Kevin McCart. He is a partner with Husch Blackwell in Washington, D.C., and author on the firm's blog, The Contractor's Perspective. Kevin, first, what's the lead up to receiving a search warrant like for companies? What's going on with investigators before they finally decide to deploy a search warrant?
Thanks, Colin. It really varies a lot from company to company, and typically a lot of what will be going on will be invisible to the company. These break down really one of two ways, with some middle ground, of course. But there will be situations where there's an emergency type event, an accident, or somewhere where the government believes that the evidence really is not permanent. And in those situations, they're really going to marshal their resources quickly and go ahead and execute the search warrant just to preserve that evidence. And really, so in those types of cases, a company, it's probably part of the regular crisis response. Company's going to be in that cycle of managing PR, getting a hold on everything that's going on, making sure everyone's accounted for, that the FBI or another agency is going to show up. Other situations are ones where there's going to be a more run-of-the-mill situation, where there's an investigation. Maybe others in the industry are being investigated, and the company will hear some whispers that maybe they're next, or they find out that a company or an individual with whom they've done business is linked to some of these other companies that are also being investigated. So they'll have some indicators there. Or frankly, kind of at the complete other end of the spectrum, there will be an ongoing grand jury investigation that the company knows about. And at some point, the government may become frustrated by the pace of that or not think that it's getting everything that it should. And at that point, they'll go ahead and execute a search warrant.
I see. And so once we've reached that phase where a search warrant does come, what steps should a company take when it does indeed receive a search warrant from the government?
Well, we've all heard this saying that the best offense is a good defense, right? So one of the things, it's absolutely to be prepared. And while prosecutors don't always execute a search warrant, there may be some situations where a grand jury subpoena is going to be fine, or voluntary cooperation. What companies should know is in all but those emergency circumstances, this isn't something that somebody wakes up that morning and decides to do. There's a lot of preparation and planning that goes into it on the government's part. They want to find out who works there. They want to see if there are any individuals, particularly executives, that they can interview at the same time the search is going on to kind of get all that information at once, or a second site of the company that maybe they should search at the same time. If there's a whistleblower that's involved at all, they're going to debrief that whistleblower at length to figure out what that whistleblower knows and help that person guide them through where they should be looking for information, or frankly, even sometimes wear a wire or cooperate with them on that day so that they can get to the core of what's going on. So with all of that, knowing how well prepared the government is, it's just imperative for a company to be well prepared as well. And that really means serving two goals. The first is absolutely, you never want to interfere with the government investigation. What happens on that day, whether it's at the beginning of an investigation or anywhere toward the end, is really going to set a tone with prosecutors and agents and going to frame their mentality and their perception of the company and the people that work there. So certainly you don't want to do that. There's also the harder, more objective criteria, which is you don't want to do anything that they're going to think is obstruction of justice. The second goal, though, is to protect the company's interests, and that really breaks down to their legal interests and their business interests. These searches can be incredibly disruptive, and not just on the day they occur. But imagine if you're, a small but relatively sophisticated company, and the FBI seizes your only server. Right. And so normally a search warrant is going to have criteria for how electronic data needs to be taken care of. And that's something that needs to be done on site. But these can have, aside from the legal implications, real world and long lasting business implications. So a company needs to be prepared to deal with all of those. The first best way to be prepared is to have a plan in place. And that plan includes letting the people who are going to be the first line of defense, so that's your receptionists, your security guards, the people that are going to get shown the badge first, that they know who to call. And then those people that get that call should have figured out, some basic steps of what they're going to do. Are they going to call outside counsel to assist? If so, who's that going to be? Is inside counsel going to handle it? Are there going to be some trusted managers that they'll leave there to help observe the search? Does the company want to send home non-essential employees so that there aren't a lot of people who could potentially interfere with the investigation and, frankly, provide information to the government that the company might not want, handled at that point? You're almost always going to want an IT person to stick around because, like I said, that person may have some ideas on ways to work with the government, to copy something on site or to otherwise minimize that interruption. But when it comes to business interruption, I really think the best way to handle is if you have an indicator of a upcoming search, whether it's a catastrophic event or sort of whisper down the hallway, you really need to start implementing a plan then to start copying this stuff and getting yourself backup plans. I mean, think of it as sort of a disaster recovery plan, but instead of it being a hurricane or a tornado, it's a search. And certainly you don't take anything that was on site, off site, and leave it there so that when the government shows up, there's nothing there. But keep copies of that off site. So if you need to bring a new server online, you can plug that in, and maybe you lose a day instead of 3 weeks.
Definitely, definitely. There are so many situations where, as you mentioned, it pays to be prepared, and this is certainly one of those. Once again, that was attorney Kevin McCart. He is with Husch Blackwell, again in Washington, D.C. For more of his insight on this topic, be sure to visit contractorsperspective.com. Thank you for joining me today, Kevin.
Thanks for having me, Colin.